the recording. The Illinois Family Resource Center, if you are not familiar with it, with who we are or what we do, we are a statewide project funded by the Illinois Department of Human Services, Division of Behavioral Health and Recovery. That is a mouthful. We encourage family members to participate in treatment and recovery support services. We also provide family members a voice in the development and implementation of practices, programs, and policies related to substance use disorder, mental health, and gambling disorder. We do like to get feedback from the community, from providers, from professionals, and what is the need out there so that we can tailor our programming. We can tailor what resources we offer to what people actually are in need of. So I was mentioning some of the things that we do. Although we do not offer direct treatment services, we do offer resources, training. We offer technical assistance, and information on how families can strengthen their road if they're in the recovery process. We offer free training. All of our trainings, all of our workshops are free. We also offer document translation, which is also free. So if you need a flyer translated from English into Spanish, you can send that over to myself, and I can help you with that translation free of cost. I worked with someone last week in translating like an intake form that she had for her clients. And she was like, "How much do I owe you?" And I'm like, "It's free. It's what we do. It's, it's the part of the services that we offer." So she was really surprised and shocked that, it was free, but I was, this is what we do. We're here to help you all get that information in if it's needed in Spanish. For the communities that you serve, we can definitely do that. So please reach out if you do need any of our services. I will put my email in the last slide. You'll see my email, and I'll also throw it in the chat before we leave. As far as CEUs for this workshop, you will receive them in the next couple weeks. You will also receive a survey. If you can please fill out the survey, that helps us, again, kind of cater or tailor our services, our workshops to what people actually need and would benefit from receiving. So please help us by filling out that survey that you will receive when you receive the CEU in the next couple weeks. So our goals for today are, we're going to aim to understand the role that ACEs play in the lives of families and understand how positive childhood experiences can help protect children. We'll learn about the impact that parental substance use has on children and families. We'll understand the link between substance use disorder and the risk of child abuse. And then we'll learn how to report suspected child abuse and what resources are available. So why does this matter? Talking about child abuse and parental substance use, and ACEs and positive childhood experiences. Why does it matter? Well, it matters because when ACEs and substance use are present, the risk for child abuse and neglect increases significantly. And we'll go over that a little bit more in detail as the presentation continues. So I forgot to mention this at the beginning. If you do need a break, you need to step away. Sometimes it is a heavy topic when we talk about children and abuse. There's nothing in detail. I don't go into really detailed abuse on children, but it's just a heavy topic sometimes. So if you need a break, you need to step away. Feel free to step away and get some water, refill your coffee cup, but please take care of yourself because it is a heavy topic. So here are some statistics to kind of support of why this matters and why we need to talk about this so that people are aware of things happening and how they can happen and what we can do to try to avoid children having to go through things that they don't really have to go through. So 1 in 5 children in the US live in a home with a parent who is addicted to drugs or alcohol. In the last year, there were more than 8 million children who lived in households with at least one parent who had a substance use disorder. That is a lot of children. Even the 1 in 5, right? That's one too many. Children being exposed to ACEs, right? That's how ACEs start developing. More than 50,000 children in Illinois live with a parent who has a substance use disorder. More than 600,000 parents with opioid use disorder live in the home with their children. An average of 15% of parents in the United States misuse prescription opioids each year. And about 1 in 8 children aged 17 or younger lived in households with at least one parent who had a past year substance use disorder. So this is why it matters. This is why it's important, because children are the most vulnerable and often the most forgotten, because they're children, right? Some might say, oh, well, they're children. They are children. They don't know what's going on. They don't need help or support. They'll figure it out. Or they are, left in silence because they don't know how to ask for help or ask for support. So children are often the most forgotten. And so if we start talking about these things, if we make communities aware, that children are suffering, children oftentimes suffering in silence, so that we can offer more support to the ones who need it. So I mentioned ACEs in my last slide of how, children are exposed to certain things in the household with, living with a caregiver who has a substance use disorder, or who has, who's over or misusing prescription drugs. That impacts the child, and eventually that child grows up, turns into an adult, and the risk for them developing a substance use disorder just increases. So let's talk about what ACEs are. If you are not aware, if you don't know what ACEs are, so ACEs are adverse childhood experiences, and they are traumatic events that occur before the age of 18. So anything including abuse, neglect, household challenges such as parental substance use, separation, having a parent incarcerated. Many ACEs, especially parental substance use, increase the likelihood of child abuse and neglect. So again, this is why it's important, right? And sometimes we don't think about the child involved until sometimes it's, sometimes it might be further down the road when they grow up and they do ask for help and support. So the more we talk about this, I like to repeat that the more we talk about it, the more people feel comfortable in seeking that support and seeking those resources. So these are some examples of ACEs. Physical abuse, and this increases when they have a parent who has a substance use disorder. Sexual abuse, verbal abuse, emotional neglect, physical neglect, living with someone who has a substance use disorder or a mental health problem at home, growing up in a household where there is domestic violence, where the adults in the home have spent time in prison, or their parents have been separated. All those are examples of ACEs, and many of these experiences, like substance use in the home or domestic violence, are directly linked to increased risk of child abuse. So it's kind of like I like to think about it as like a domino effect. It's not just the abuse happens and it just happens out of nowhere. There's kind of like there's other things that are leading to that. ACEs and the brain. So there's that trauma, right? People react differently to trauma. Trauma is an ACE, right? So these changes can impact a caregiver's ability to respond safely and consistently to a child's needs. So your brain is changing. The substance, whatever substance the person is using, kind of hijacks the brain, and so a lot of times when the parent, when the caregiver, when the adult, when the person is on this substance, their reactions are different. So trauma, ACEs, what they do to the brain is they reduce the ability to respond, learn, or figure things out, which can result in problems in school or problems in the workplace. It increases difficulty in making friends and maintaining relationships, increases stress hormones, which affects the body's ability to fight infection, increases problems with learning and memory, which can be permanent, may cause lasting health problems. So a lot of people don't think, well, people who don't, caregivers, parents, grandparents, community members, sometimes they don't make that relationship or of how it's trauma that leads to something else. So for example, when I was working at the advocacy center, there was a case where a person was a young girl was she went in, right, and before the abuse happened, or before the mom found out that the girl was being abused, sexually abused, the girl was complaining of like stomach pains. She was stomach problems. The mom would take it to the doctor. The doctor was like, there's nothing wrong with her. She doesn't, like, there's nothing that we can see that there's, with her stomach, there's something wrong. She's okay. So it continued on for months. And the girl would, complain of stomach problems. And it turns out that she was being sexually abused. And so the mom said she missed it, the doctor missed it, because they weren't making that connection of, what was happening. So it's not just, like I mentioned earlier, it's not just like the abuse, and it's not just the abuse that you can see, or bruises on the body. Like sometimes it's other abuse that you can't see. And there's other signs that your body gives you, to tell you that something's going on. So if you work with children, if you work with families, it's important to keep all that in mind, because people react differently to these experiences. Some people might have, like this slide shows, some people might have difficulty sleeping or frequent nightmares because of that trauma, because of those ACEs. They might not want to be around certain people. They might have difficulty showing affection because they're just not used to that, or they don't know how. Changes in their mood. If they're young, bedwetting, that's also a result of trauma. These behaviors are often responses to trauma, and without support can lead to long-term challenges, including substance use. So it's, like I said, a domino effect, right? It's left untreated, trauma's left untreated, and it just, as kids are experiencing these trauma events, they grow up and they start self-medicating, and that's when they can start using substances, gambling, because they're trying to look for something to help them fill that void or feel better. So it's important to, again, let people know that support is available. And like I will keep repeating this, the more we talk about it, the more people will know that it's okay and they're not alone and there is help out there. So Domino effect. Just as ACEs, lead to trauma, impact some behaviors, there's also a way to kind of help mitigate that, right? With positive childhood experiences. So positive childhood experiences are those nurturing experiences. They're those supportive experiences that foster resilience and healthy development in children and adults. Positive childhood experiences are one of the most powerful ways we can break the cycle between ACEs. So the more positive childhood experiences someone has, the better outcome they are going to have. So they might having more positive childhood experiences. Yes, you will get that, Tamara. You will get the links, and you will get a copy of the presentation sent out to you with the CEUs, and all the links will be on there where the information came from. So positive childhood experiences, they are, they help mitigate that. So what are they, right? So it's having at least one caregiver with whom the child feels safe and protected. And that caregiver can be, it doesn't have to be mom, dad. It can be an aunt, an uncle. It can be a neighbor, the teacher, someone in the child's life who makes that child feel safe and protected. Feeling a sense of belonging in the workplace, at school, like you feel like you belong, that's positive. Everyone likes to feel like they belong, right? Everyone likes to get those positive reinforcements. We as adults love it too, not just children. So it's important. Having supportive friendships, being treated fairly, all these different experiences are positive, and they help kind of like, mitigate the ACEs that someone might have had when they were younger. So why are positive childhood experiences so impactful? Because they help regulate your stress hormones. They help your brain regulate those emotions. They help regulate that the decision making. They help you develop into like an empathetic person, human being. They help you develop trust in relationships. They help you have that sense of control. They help alleviate feelings of helplessness from trauma. So again, more positive childhood experiences, more positive experiences are going to help, those who had trauma earlier in life, kind of, start the recovery journey. So how do we promote positive childhood experiences? So let's foster safe, stable relationships with the children around us. If you work with children or with adults around us, promote belonging through engagement in groups. If you have, groups where you work, try to promote that, like everybody belongs, everyone is safe here. Encourage open communication. All these strategies don't just support children, they actively reduce the risk of child abuse and help interrupt the cycle of trauma. That's the cycle that we're trying to break, the trauma cycle. Because again, that domino effect, ACEs can lead to people using substances, and not just using substances, it can be, problem gambling. So and that can lead to feelings of frustration, or that can lead to, just feeling different, and that can lead to abuse later on. So let's keep that in mind as we continue on with the presentation. So we talked about ACEs, we talked about positive childhood experiences, and how that can lead to someone using substances, right? What is a substance use disorder? So A substance use disorder is a treatable mental disorder. You have to remember and remind people that it is treatable. There is help, there is support. And it's a mental disorder that affects a person's brain and behavior. I mentioned earlier that when someone is misusing substances, it's like that substance hijacks the brain and that substance is in control. And sometimes that person, acts differently. And that is when they're not in control. They might not be in control. And I'll talk about that later. That can lead to abusing a child or neglecting a child because they don't know, they're not fully in control. It's that substance that is in control at that time. It can run in families. It can be where you live, right? You're exposed to it. I was at a conference a couple weeks ago where someone was sharing their story, and they mentioned that it was when they were little, that's all they saw around them. And it was a problem with gambling. So so she developed problem gambling because that's all she saw. So she thought it was normal. Her parents did it, her grandparents did it. She saw that. So she continued the cycle. And again, a substance use disorder, it can alter the brain structure. And that can, lead to a mental disorder. So again, going back, that domino effect, right? It's not just one thing happens and that's it. It's things leading up to it and then things happen after. Thank you, Tamara. Remind me at the end of this presentation, and we would love to hear it if you're willing to share. Thank you. So substance use and ACEs. We talked about this a little bit. So ACEs increases the likelihood of substance use. And when substance use affects parents, it increases the risk of child abuse. And it continues that cycle. And if it's left untreated, that child, will eventually grow up, might have their own family, and continue the cycle. So we need to treat it. People need to know that it's, again, there's help, there's support, so that it can be treated, so it can, so that we break the cycle. And it's a cycle that's been going on for generations, right? And sometimes it's just, it takes people like you all that are, boots on the ground and that you work with families. Some of you might work with children to talk about it so that people kind of let go of that stigma around, oh, we don't talk about substance use in our family. Our family's good, nothing's going on, because sometimes they feel ashamed. They don't want to let others know what's going on. So the more we talk about it, people start seeing that, okay, I'm not alone. I can get help. I'm not going to be judged, so I'm going to seek help. So what's the connection? This is something that, again, at the beginning, it was why this matters, why, talking about child abuse, talking about ACEs, talking about positive childhood experiences, talking about substance use disorder, it all starts connecting, because ACEs, if someone who has multiple ACEs, it increases their risk of developing a substance use disorder. And if they are a parent or a caregiver, them developing a substance use disorder can lead to, it impacts their parenting. It can lead to neglect. It can lead to physical abuse. It can lead to sexual abuse on a child. So it's all connected, and it all leads back to the ACEs, right? To the trauma that the caregiver, the child start seeing this, and again, that child starts growing up, and they continue the cycle because they don't know anything else, right? That's their normal. So substance use impacts parenting, and that increases the risk of child abuse. And then that child growing up is experiencing new ACEs, right? So the caregiver the caregiver experienced ACEs as they were growing up, started using substances, had children or has children, and then the children are now, experiencing those ACEs, that trauma, because that's where that's where they're living, that's what they see, and then they continue the cycle. So again, domino effect. It's a cycle that we need to break. We need to understand it, and we need to, again, offer that support so that hopefully we start breaking that cycle. So now that we've seen how ACEs and substance use are connected, now let's talk about how parental substance use increases the risk of child abuse. So this is where I will kind of go over what child abuse is, what's considered child abuse. Before I started working, even as a teacher, I always kind of just thought that abuse was just like physical abuse, right? I guess I never really connected everything, until I started working more with children, that I'm like, it doesn't have to be physical abuse. There's other kinds of abuse. And that's the thing that sometimes people don't know, that there's other types of abuse, or they don't consider, like, verbally abusing someone, they don't consider that abuse, because it's like, well, I don't see a sign of it, nothing happened, right? So child abuse, is the mistreatment of a child under the age of 18. So it can be mistreatment by the parents, or the parents, boyfriend, girlfriend, or another, another adult in the home, an immediate relative or someone living in their home, a caretaker, such as a babysitter or daycare worker, any person responsible for the child's welfare, such as a healthcare provider, educator, coach, or youth program volunteer. It can also be, and I learned this when I was working at the Advocacy Center, it can be child abuse even if it's another child, and that other child is older and kind of like more exerts that power over the younger child. That can also be considered child abuse. So it doesn't have to be an adult, doing this abusing. It can be another child. So that's something else that we need to be aware of. Sometimes we just think, oh, well, an adult, but it can be someone their same age or a little older, but has that like power over them. That's considered child abuse. Yeah, child on child. And the child on child is very common in like daycare settings and in schools. I mean, when my son was in daycare, there was, parents talk, and there was a situation where a child was in the same like room as as all the other children, and there was two boys. The older one was a little older, took the younger one to like by where the cubbies are, and was asking the younger one to touch his privates. And so that was considered abuse. So the whole investigation, whatever, it happened, but yeah, we sometimes we don't think about that. It can be like child on child. Yes. And it can be missed. I saw that comment. It can be missed because again, we don't think about, oh, well, they're just kids, right? They're not doing it, they're just being kids. But we have to be aware of that. And especially if you work with children, if you are exposed to children, you always kind of have to be on, just always looking at what they're doing, always paying attention to what they're doing, because that one can be easily missed. So child abuse includes physical abuse. So, bruises on the body, biting can be considered abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, verbally, abusing a child, that's child abuse, and neglect. And many of these forms of abuse are more likely to occur in homes impacted by substance use and unresolved trauma. So the physical abuse, how can that one be impacted by substance use? Well, just think about a caregiver who has a child, right? And they have a substance use disorder. They are, let's say, alcohol, right? So they're drinking. Remember that substance hijacks the brain. Yes, exactly. Drunk parents coming home. They don't know, they might not know their force, right? So they might not think that they're hurting the child, but they are because they are, that substance makes you just, sometimes it gives you that extra like power, right? And you are just, you're more powerful than when you are, than when you're not on that substance. So you don't know your strength. So you can be hurting the child. Sexual abuse. I mean, that one, it can be you again, the substance is hijacking your brain. You don't really think about what you're doing. And not only the caregiver, but if that caregiver is bringing friends over, and they are using substances and there's children in the home, you never know what can happen, right? So all these things are avoidable, right? If people get that education. Yes, I love your comments, Tamara. You're spot on. And it's again, when it involves children, it kind of, sometimes caregivers are like, oh, well, they're my friends. They're coming over to drink. We're all safe. The kids are safe. But again, we don't know how that person reacts when they're on that substance. Emotional abuse, again, the same thing. That parent who is on that substance, alcohol, comes home and just starts, saying all these mean things to the child, calls them names, doesn't think it's, anything serious. That child might be like, oh, well, that's just normal behavior. That's how my adult behaves when they're drunk, when they're using alcohol. So, it's normal. So they grow up, right? And that's just trauma, right? Imagine a child 5 years old, let's say, 5 years old, has a caregiver, comes home, and this caregiver starts, like, oh, you're so, stupid, and calling them all these names. And that is traumatic for a child, right? That affects their self-esteem, their confidence. That can lead that child to go and do other things because, they think so, they don't think highly of themselves. They lack that confidence. So that might lead them to go do something else. Neglect. I am going to use, the money instead of buying food for my children. I need to go buy that substance, or I need to go buy that alcohol. I need to go buy that drug. So my children will be fine. I don't have to buy them food. So again, that substance is hijacking the brain. That caregiver does not know, what really is going on when they're on that substance, or even as far as like, I'm not taking them to the doctor. I don't have money for the doctor visit. I don't have money for for the rent, or for the mortgage, because I spent that on gambling. I wasted it on gambling. So again, all that leads to that abuse. So ACEs, trauma, substance use, and then, that can lead to child abuse, if they have children. So children living with one or more parents with a substance use disorder may see a lot of trauma, fighting in the home, right? The adults fighting, or the adults fighting with the children. I mean, that's not rare to see. The children might get physically hurt, be sexually abused. I mentioned neglected, right? The risk of being neglected increases. See or be part of illegal things. Be confused about what they feel and how to act, and have an increased risk of developing a substance use disorder themselves because they see it. They think it's normal. They see mom or dad every day come home from work, wasted, and that's all they see. So it's just it's it's a domino effect. Tamara, it's up to you. I can give you the chance to talk at the end, if you want to share with everyone, or if you want to talk to me in private, we can also do that. So it's totally up to you. Neglect in Illinois, neglect is defined as the failure of a parent or caretaker to meet minimal parenting standards for providing adequate supervision, food, clothing, medical care, shelter, or other basic needs. So neglect is a form of abuse. So again, a lot of people don't make that connection because, they think of abuse as something that is more, like the physical abuse or the sexual abuse, something that you can see, right? The verbal abuse, the emotional abuse, and neglect, sometimes you can't see that. Like it's not that obvious. But neglect is a form of abuse, and it's often the most common one that's seen in families affected by substance use. Because again, that family might be choosing to use the money that they have to go and buy their substance or go gamble, or leave the children alone at home. I mean, there's been cases where, you know, parents, caregivers leave their children in the car at the casino while they are gambling. So they're, that's neglect. That's putting their child in danger. Something can happen to that child while they're in the car waiting for their parent, right? So and it's the substance that's hijacking that brain, that's making that parent not really think clearly. In Illinois, selling, distributing, or giving drugs or alcohol to a child is considered child abuse. The manufacture or possession of meth in the presence of a child is a felony. Exposing children to the distribution of illegal drugs is considered child endangerment. So think about if the caregiver is, you know, using a substance, selling a substance, making it, and that child is there and being exposed to that, that is considered child endangerment. That's putting the child in danger. If that substance, let's say, whatever drug that caregiver is using is kept in the home, you're putting that child in danger. That child can go get it. And now with all these, like all these shops selling gummies, right? Gummies that can be very dangerous if a child gets a hold of them. And that is if you're exposing your child to that, it's sad because you think about that a lot of children, this is a reality. This is what they're living. And they don't know how to ask for help. They don't know how to ask for that support. So to me, this is a very hard topic because it's reality for some, and sometimes there's so little that they don't know, that what they're living in is not normal and it's not right. This is data from 2024. So according to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Administration, for children and families, this is where this information came from. And it's from the federal fiscal year of 2024. So according to that report, 532,000 oh goodness gracious, I just like chopped that number, were victims of child abuse and neglect nationally. So that's a lot of children, right? 1,773 children died from abuse and neglect. That is one too many children who are dying from being abused and being neglected. The chart underneath this data is broken down in the the cause or the child living with the parent who had an alcohol disorder or a drug disorder. So according to this, and not all the states reported information. So I'm sure that this number can be higher because not all the states reported. I think there's only a total of, I think, 44 states who like reported information. But 29 out of those 44 states, they reported that 762 fatalities came from a household who had an alcohol abuse problem. And 1,036 fatalities came from a household who had a drug abuse problem. So this report, I have a link here, and you'll get the link as well. It has a lot of valuable information. It breaks it down by state, and it gives you the numbers by state, and like reasons and perpetrator information, like broken down into like numbers. So it's a very informational. It gives you a lot of good information. This report. Child abuse and neglect are very, very common. At least 1 in 7 children have experienced child abuse or neglect in the past year in the United States. So think about this. If you, even in your, in your close circle, right? If you at least know 7 children, one of those has experienced child abuse or neglect. If you work in a classroom and you have there's 30 kids in the class, at least 4 have experienced child abuse or neglect. This is more common than we think. This is more common than we can see. And again, a lot of times because it's children, we're like, they're children, they're okay. They'll be okay. There's nothing going on at home. But sometimes we need to step in and really observe what children are being exposed to. Who is at an increased risk of child abuse? Children who are young and cannot fully express themselves because they don't know how to ask for help. They might not know that what is happening to them is wrong. Have special health care needs, have parents who face mental health problems, reside in communities with high rates of violence, and the LGBTQ plus community, because sometimes they are, they're already in this group where people kind of like, view them a certain way, and so they don't know how to ask for help because they don't want to be more stigmatized, right? So they just prefer not to ask for help, not to seek that support because they don't want to expose themselves, or they don't want to, sometimes a perpetrator tells them, well, if you say something, you're going to get more in trouble. Or if you say something, no one's going to believe you. Or, they start grooming them because they know that they come from a troubled home, and they offer that support to them. They offer those resources that the child might need, and so they start that grooming, and that grooming leads to that abuse. Abuse happens in all communities. It doesn't matter if it's, a wealthy community. It doesn't matter if it's, a low income community. It can happen anywhere. These are just some examples of, this one is from a client who was she's 15, and she was in her counseling session, and she just said, my mom is up and down. Sometimes she's fine and sober, but it can quickly change and she becomes worse again. Gets abusive when she's drunk and gets angry at me and my sisters. I don't like being at home. 15, and she's being exposed to this, right? 13-year-old girl, counseling session. My dad has a drug and alcohol problem. He makes me sleep with other men so he can get drugs. He's also made me take drugs before these men come over. And again, this is, This is a reality for some. And always when I read these examples, it gets me emotional because I have a daughter, right? I have my own children, and I just can't imagine, them being exposed to all this trauma, right? I just can't. And I've seen it growing up, right, with friends of mine when I was in grammar school, when I was in high school, where they would talk about their home life, and it was just like, wow, like it's sad. But again, when we talk about these things, when we education is really I feel like that's what is going to further push us to break this cycle. Educating children. I know when I was in the advocacy center, I would go into schools and talk to children about, safe touches and unsafe touches and abuse, and how, these things are not normal, and that they should, seek help. There's help, there's support, that they shouldn't be afraid. So I know that it has to be tough for children who feel like they are all alone. But one positive thing that comes out of this is that we know that children are very resilient, and they bounce back from hard times like really fast. Sometimes, we see it. It might not be something as dramatic as like abuse going on, but sometimes we see how they're upset about something, and then the next minute they forgot about it. So they can bounce back. They do need more of those positive experiences so that it fosters their growth, their positive growth. It makes them feel heard and supported, and knowing that there's that one safe adult, and that one safe adult might be you. And that's what matters. We all have to remember, even if you don't work with children, we all are around children. Sometimes we have our own children, family. You might be that safe adult for that child, for that neighbor, who might be going through things. You might be that one adult. And I know sometimes, again, we don't think about it. Oh, children, they're okay. They're just being kids. But sometimes kids are the ones who need that extra love and extra support, so that they know that we care about them. This slide is just a quick reminder, if you are not aware how to report child abuse or neglect, or you can do it online when it's not an emergency. If you know that it's it requires immediate action, it's an emergency, call the hotline. And if you think that the child is in immediate danger, that it can result in their death or serious harm, you call 911. If you make a report, just give the information that you were told from the child. I know sometimes making a report can be intimidating, or it can make you feel, nervous or scared. But it's the right thing to do if you're a mandated reporter. If you suspect abuse, please report it. There is no legal repercussions if you make a report and it's found to be not true. As long as you make as long as you're making that report in like good faith, right? You truly believe that that child was being abused, based on what they told you, based on what you saw. There's no legal repercussions if you make that report, and it's completely confidential. They don't release your name to the caregiver. But please, if you suspect it, if you see it, please call it in. Sometimes it's better just to make that report. Yeah, thank you, Josh, for saying that. And what I would teach the kids when I was going into the classrooms was, if something's going on, and if you go to one adult and that adult just dismisses you and, oh, I don't believe you, go to the next adult. And if that adult doesn't believe you, go to the next one. You keep going to an adult until one adult says, okay, I believe you, and makes that report. Because again, like Josh said, sometimes we miss it or we just like dismiss it, right? Oh, I don't believe them. I don't think that's really going on at home, or you're making up stories. But again, it's better to make that report and let DCFS do the investigation, than not reporting it and then you find out, something it was valid, something was happening. So better to report it. You're not the one investigating. Just make the report and let DCFS do the investigation.
Christina,
Yes.
real quick, I want to tell you I haven't had a chance to talk to you. I'm on the scan committee for DCFS, and I'm on the subcommittee around mandated reporting, and they've changed the way they're doing it, and it's much easier to do, and they have a brand new training. So I encourage anybody on here that's a mandated reporter, go through that training, and you will feel so much more comfortable doing it now than you would have 6 months ago.
Thank you for that,
That's it.
Nancy. Thank you. Yes, so yes, please, if you need the training, you can do it online. You can go through the training. It gives you examples like, of like scenarios. And yes, you will feel more confident after taking that training. And again, just, if a child comes to you, just make that, if it's substantiated, if they tell you enough that you're like, okay, I need to make a report. Just all you're doing is just reporting with the child. You're not making things up. You're not adding any extra details. You are just reporting what that child told you. And again, let DCFS do the investigation, but you'll know that you at least made the report.
Right.
Some resources available. There's books that you can use to talk to kids about abuse, books that you can share with caregivers, with parents, that they can use to talk to their kids about addiction, about substance use disorders, about their bodies, right? About keeping them safe. These are just more books. There's resources on our website that you can go through. There's Prevent Child Abuse Illinois. There's a lot of resources that you can access that are free, that are both in Spanish and English, where you can share the information. You can share, these resources. Remember that April is Child Abuse Prevention Month. So again, the more we talk about it, the more people are okay. It's okay to talk about these things. It's not like, oh, we don't talk about that. It's let's get the word out. Children need us. Children need you. They're counting on us to keep them safe. And again, let's try to break this cycle. Let's try to break this like domino effect of the trauma, developing into other things later on in life. So let's break the cycle. Let's all work together to get the word out, to educate people, and just just share the resources, share the information. Here is my contact information. This was all I have for you. Thank you so much for joining me. If you want to share something, you can raise your hand and we can unmute you, or if you want to put it in the chat. If you want to share something in private with me, that's also okay. But thank you so much for joining us. A reminder, your CEUs, you will get them in a couple weeks, along with the survey, along with this presentation, and a lot of links where you can find this information. Yes, it went by really quick. Thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I appreciate it. Remember, April Child Abuse Prevention Month. Please share information, share resources with the community. Let's let children know and caregivers know that there's help and resources if they need them. Jessica, the CEUs will be emailed. They will be emailed to the email that you used to register for this workshop. So be on the lookout for it. If you do not receive it and it's the end of May and you're like, where's my CEU? Please reach out to me, or to Nancy, and we will look into it. But you should be receiving it in the next couple weeks. Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of the day. Enjoy. I think it's supposed to be beautiful weather today, so enjoy the weather. I know it's been crazy, but enjoy your weekend. Enjoy the rest of your week. You will get the CEUs emailed to you, along with the presentation and the links that you can find the information that I had on my presentation, and a lot of extra links where you can find resources. Priscilla, you will get the links with the email with the CEU. I'll send that out. Well, it won't come from me. It'll come from another woman who works with us. So be on the lookout for an email from Angela from the Illinois Family Resource Center from our house. You'll get the CEU from her. But again, if it's the end of May and you still don't receive your CEU, please reach out to me and I'll look into it. Thank you everyone. If you're still on here, and you enjoyed our presentation, we have two coming up in May and we have two more in June, and that'll be our end of this fiscal year. So there's two coming up in May. Visit our website and you can see the training calendar there, and you can sign up if you want, if you have time, if those topics interest you. We have two coming up in May and two coming up in June. And they're all good. I recommend them. Thank you. Thank you everyone. Yes, Sarah. The presentation and all that information will come with the CEU, so be on the lookout for it. All right, bye everyone. Have a good rest of the day. Enjoy the rest of your week. Oh, okay. All right, Sarah. Be on the lookout for those. You can sign up on our website for the workshops coming up in May and in June. And if you're subscribed to our newsletter, you'll also get that information for the upcoming workshops in the May newsletter.